Hey, what's up everybody? In this crash course tutorial for Shadows of Esteren by Studio Agate, I'm going to go over the expansion rules for a narrative arc. You can find these rules in Book 3, Dearg. Let's get into it.
Cybernation Uncensored.
All right, before we get into it, I want to mention a few things here. You're going to see that these expansion rules basically tie the character into the plot, into the campaign in different ways, and connect them to other characters and NPCs. This is perfect for pre-made characters per se, and it even lists which pre-made characters would fit to which narrative arc, or it would work great with new characters, in which case you could kind of pick and choose which narrative arc. You can also go over how it might fit into the campaign leading into the campaign. If you ever have seen my GM tips on session 0, that's a perfect place to go over this with new characters if you're not working with pre-made. And even with pre-made, you might have a session 0 to go over those things. I am a huge fan of session 0s, and you'll see along the way of this video how a lot of these key points and the way that this works fits perfectly into a session 0, or at least in a little maybe pre-session of campaign if, once again, you're using pre-mades or this is ongoing and you've already had your session 0 a while ago. Again, these expansion rules are in Book 3, Dearg, and it kind of lays out these narrative arcs and such to link you with particular NPCs or situations as it would be specific to Dearg. Including the topics of the narrative arc, whether major or minor. I'll go over that in just a moment. But keep in mind, this can fit with any campaign. It doesn't necessarily have to only be for Dearg. I'm going to go over the examples that are laid out in that book and explain how that kind of works. But again, make it your own, have it fit into your own campaign. Just enjoy these expansion rules to add a narrative arc into your gameplay for each of the characters. All right, you'll see here that these expansion rules come with another sheet to add to your character sheet. Basically, you get a fourth sheet, and you'll see the different sections here all laid out. Now, drive, determination, advantages, which also has to do with passion. I'm going to lightly get into that in a moment, but I do a much deeper dive on how that works, the calculations of that, and all that stuff in a separate crash course that goes over focuses, which has to do with determination, points, drive, and all that stuff. But again, I'll lightly explain it in this video, so at least you're not completely lost. Let's get into it. The first thing that I want to go over are the key points that the book kind of breaks down, which corresponds to the different sections of that character sheet. The first are your ties to the native or adoptive land. Basically, in this case, obviously it's going to connect you to Dearg and that vale and that area. And again, you can make that in any campaign, wherever the location are that the campaign's taking place, or where the players are, or maybe where they came from. You can work this in any number of ways, but ultimately you want to work out each character having a tie to the native or adoptive land, and if it can tie into the actual campaign at hand, even better. The second part is that drive, like I said, which is basically information summed up in the book and in the expansion rules. I'm going to lightly go over that in a moment, but again, like, it sums it up in ways that it gives the advantages and lists things and the calculations and how to kind of reward the points and things. I'm doing a separate crash course on that because it deserves a little more focus, we'll say, for those focuses. The next is the narrative arcs, and these are basically going to correspond to the campaign, and they're going to be narrative arcs that tie the characters in. They're going to involve, allies and enemies and just details. They might even have a couple prerequisites and stuff. I'll explain that in a moment. And then the last part is relations, and that's kind of tying in the characters to each other, or NPCs for that matter. But again, you make any of these sections and any of these sort of expansion rules work for your campaign. If you have Dearg, Absolutely, this is a perfect opportunity to drop these expansion rules in, and it fits perfectly with that because that is exactly where these expansion rules came from. But if you've already gone through that, maybe you didn't use those, didn't understand them, maybe this is helpful explaining it, and now you can use it with your own campaign, or maybe you're not going to use Dearg, in which case you want to kind of come up with your own narrative arcs for your own campaigns, in which case, once again, this video will be helpful. All right, let's get into those different sections. The first one I mentioned was drive, which is determined by your passion and determination. Again, I'm not going to get into the details of this because, you know, your focuses, which kind of is tied in with determination and all that, it has its own crash course. So check out that video for that. But ultimately, your passion, which I go over in the character creation video, is a fault that's associated with your combativeness, if that's one of your major ways. So ultimately, your passion stat, for the sake of calculating your drive, is going to be equal to your combativeness. But again, I'm going to go over determination points and focuses in a separate video. You take that passion plus your determination, that gives you your drive. Your drive basically being what drives your character. What is their motivation point? What are they focused on, in a sense, right? So check out that focus crash course to get a little more details on calculating that and using those determination points and advantages. The next part I'm going to go over is bonds between the characters. I love this section. This is always my favorite part in session zeros, and that's figuring out how do the characters know each other, right? They don't just all of a sudden show up and do a mission together, unless that's part of the story. Maybe they all showed up because they needed a gig, right? But it's always better to tie them in a deeper, more intricate way, right, on a deeper level. And it doesn't need to be all the characters. Maybe it's just some of them here and there, and then they're together for a different reason. But again, make it your own. You can see in the book they give some examples like feelings. Maybe they have a friendship, maybe even love. Lineage, maybe there's something in the family tree, right? Childhood, maybe they knew each other growing up in a way. Maybe they had a same mentor. And then obviously you're figuring out your ally and enemy, which also can stack on top of if you already have an ally and enemy, which would have been figured out in your advantages and disadvantages part of character creation. And I go over that in the character creation video. So again, make sure you watch that video before you get into expansion rules. Watch all the other videos before you get into some of these expansion rules. I think that'll be much more helpful in understanding, right? But that's basically how that works, and tying the characters together. You have all these options and you figure that out. It obviously gives some examples and elaborates on that right here for you. Now, the last thing I want to go over are the actual narrative arcs. There's major and minor narrative arcs. The majors kind of tying directly into the campaign. The minor maybe not directly to the campaign or affecting it. However, these examples that they give in Dearg are examples specific to that campaign, but you can make them your own. You can alter them. You can even come up with your own. And if you have your own campaign, obviously come up with your own or use some of these. Again, these are examples. And the ones that they give in the book are love, ethics, guilt, adoption, and then the minor ones they give are vengeance, origins, ambition, and regret. And each one might label, you know, which class or profession they best fit in, right? Like adoption, maybe fitting in better with someone from the temple, or, you know, guilt fitting in with Demorthans, or ethics with Magientist. So it kind of gives examples, or maybe love that doesn't necessarily have to have a specific group or whatever. It can fit with anyone that wants that narrative arc. And then the minor ones, vengeance, origins, ambition, regret, same thing. It gives examples. It can tie into specific groups or professions, and there might be some prerequisites as well in all of these, where it kind of explains, like, look, if you're picking up this narrative arc, your character should do this or have done that or be from there or blah, blah, blah. So check out those details. It breaks down the suggested narrative arcs in Dearg and gives all those sections some details so you can better drop them into your gameplay. But that's ultimately it. That's how narrative arcs work. They are literally one of my favorite expansion rules of the game because I am so much into heavy role play. I love this game because it's not relying so much on crunch. It's relying a lot on storytelling and collaborating with the players as a game leader to create these awesome stories and campaigns and situations and scenes. And these narrative arcs really pull the characters into the campaign. They tie them to each other, tie them to NPCs. It just helps further bring these characters to life. I love it, whether you use it in a session 0 right before a campaign specifically for Dearg or anything else. So there you have it. I hope it was helpful. Please give me a like, leave a comment, give a share. Let's give more attention to this awesome game, Shadows of Esteren. There's links in the description where you can basically get this 4th character sheet if you don't have Dearg. But there's also other links to the Cybernation Uncensored communities, and I would really appreciate you joining and dropping by and saying hi. Also, if you have any questions about any of these rules, expansion rules or other Crash Course videos, just leave that question in the comments and I'll hit you up and help you out. All right, everybody. Take care. I'll see you next time.
Cybernation Uncensored.